Well, good morning, everybody.
That's 877-850-8585. Now here's your host, attorney Jeff Vastola.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to Vastola on the Law. I'm your host, Jeff Vastola. I'm here almost every Saturday morning to give you free legal advice. All you have to do is sit back and listen. More importantly, if you have a question of your own, then call the show. Call the show. 877-850-8585. That's the number to call into the program. And I have things to talk about for the next 30 minutes, but I do prefer to take your phone calls and discuss your issues. Last week, I had a phone call from Don, and I'll be talking about his question. And I also had a typed-in question from my cousin Julie. So both of those issues gave me something to research. Both of those issues gave me topics for discussion today, and that's what I really prefer to do. Instead of coming up with my own topics, I like to address yours. In the event that those two issues don't give me enough time, I have my trusty Florida Law Weekly that I'll be discussing. Good morning, Moses. Nice to see you. Unfortunately, I won't be playing soccer with you tomorrow. I've got to be in Miami. But if you want to call into the show, the number is 877-850-8585. Call in immediately. Don't wait till the end of the show. Sometimes we run out of time. And don't wait for me to stop talking, because I'm going to keep talking for the next 30 minutes. And if you want to find out more about me and my practice, how I spend my time during the work week, go to my website. It's vastolalegal.com, and you can see our past results. You can find out more about me, where I went to law school, all that kind of stuff. It's vastolalegal.com is the website.
That's Don from Delray.
All right, let's talk to Don in Delray. That's a phone call right out of the box. I love it. Good morning, Don.
Good morning, Mr. Vastola. I called you last week about the information I'm looking for concerning an LLC corporation that my friend has. He's purchasing 3 automobiles for cash. There'll be no financing. And I'd like to know that if something ever happens to him when he's not around anymore, would other people be able to take all the cars, or is there some clause he can put in his contract that I can retain the car for as long as I need it?
Well, we batted this around for a little bit last week, Don, and I got to a point where I was uncomfortable talking any more on the issue because this is not my area of law. But I did the research, and what I found is that generally my conclusions last week were accurate in that the assets to an LLC, the membership, would transfer to the heirs according to the statute. You mentioned to me last week that this person is likely intestate, meaning he doesn't have a will. And so the statute would say that if in fact he's married, you know, the assets of the LLC and actually the membership of the LLC would transfer to the wife. That can be somewhat problematic if you have a multi-member LLC and the other members didn't necessarily want to be business partners with the wife. And so there's an article I found that talks about how within an LLC, the members can have a partnership agreement or an operating agreement that will dictate what happens if any of the members should die. You can have a purchase arrangement where the other members of the LLC will buy out the wife so that they don't necessarily have to be a business partner with her. There's all sorts of ways to go about doing this, but my advice to you, Don, is to talk to your friend. If it's a single member LLC and if he's married, understand that the LLC and its operation would go to the wife unless he dictates otherwise in an operating agreement and also via a will. So your question is, you know, what's going to happen with these 3 vehicles, and am I going to be allowed to continue to use one of them? If he creates proper estate planning documents to suggest that in fact that's his intent, then yes, you can. If he doesn't do that and he dies, then it would be up to the wife, assuming there is a wife, to decide whether she wants to maintain the LLC, whether she wants to allow you to continue using the vehicle. That's ultimately the answer to your question.
If he dies intestate, then she would get everything if she's still alive.
Yeah, basically, if they're married, my understanding of the intestate statute is that the wife essentially gets all of the assets, and then upon her death to be distributed to their heirs. So if he does not have a will,
Go ahead.
if he does not have a will, then it's strongly suggested that he create one. For those of you that don't know, at least in the state of Florida, wills are very inexpensive. So it's always a good idea for the testator to tell everybody what is the intent. That's my point.
Can he put me in a corporate resolution so I can retain using the car?
Well, we talked about a corporate resolution last week, and it's not necessarily a corporate resolution because it would be an operating agreement. You would want him to create an operating agreement that has a provision in it for what happens to the vehicles upon his death. If there's an operating agreement that says the LLC shall continue upon my death, and upon my death, one of these vehicles shall, be for the benefit of Don, or however the attorney wants to draft it as it's being written, then whoever takes over as the successor to the LLC would very likely have to continue with that operating agreement.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, sir.
All right, Don, you have a great weekend, all right? Stay warm.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I get close to the screen, if anybody's wondering that I have something on my nose, I don't. I had a precancer scraped off my nose yesterday, so that's what that little mark is there. But thank you, Don, for calling in. Thank you, Don, for your question. As I plead with everybody every week, I do prefer to take questions, people asking for free legal advice. I really love it when it's a question that I can answer right here and right now because it makes me look smart. But more often than not, you're going to ask me something where I don't know the answer, and that's fine too, because then I do the research and I find really cool information that I can share with all of you. So I see that my mother is watching again this morning. Good morning. Good morning, my mom up in Tennessee. Hope to see you again soon. And Moses, again, good morning. Nice to see you. So let me segue into my second question from last week, which popped up on Facebook Live. So if you were listening to the show last week and not watching on Facebook Live, you probably didn't see this. But my cousin Julie, good morning, Julie. Hopefully you're watching. If not, then you can, of course, watch this program on my YouTube channel, or if you go to my website, you can find it at either place basically by about Monday afternoon, because my staff will upload this video to either location. So if you happen to ask me a question and if you missed the following week's show, you're not lost. You haven't lost out because the information is still available to you. But if you're a long-time listener or watcher of this program, you may know that over the summer we lost my cousin Julie's husband to a rare form of cancer. His name is Chris, and we had asked for prayers and we were hoping for healing, but like my father, that just wasn't God's plan. And so we miss Chris dearly, died way too young. But his wife, Julie, my cousin, is going to be keeping his name in perpetuity by starting a 501c3. I presume it's a 501c3. That's essentially the question she asked. And the question was, is it less expensive to start the 501c3 in New York or North Carolina? Because she spends her time in between the two places, and she's trying to figure out where should she start and run this organization. And her question included some information that she was quoted that it would cost around $5,000 to start this foundation in the name of her deceased husband, Chris. And so the information I found was off the internet. It's no secret. But I found a really helpful website. I've already forwarded all of this information on to Julie, but if anybody's interested in starting a 501c3, a nonprofit foundation, by the way, everybody has heard of a 501c3, but if you go to the federal statute, 501 subsection C, subsection 3, you'll notice that there are, I'm trying to remember, I actually haven't looked at the federal statute in about 2 or 3 years. I went to that statute a few years ago when I was looking at perhaps trying to run a ski resort out in Colorado as a 501c3 organization, and I realized that there's more than just the C3 subsection. There's, I think, about 25 different ways that you can set up a nonprofit foundation. It doesn't have to be 501c3. It can be a 501, and I don't remember if it's the sub letters or the sub numbers, but 501A through L or whatever it was. So if you're interested, look into that. I might use this as an opportunity to look into that again and speak more educated on the topic next week. But if anyone's interested in trying to find out what it might cost for you to set up a 501c3 nonprofit in your state, then go to this website that I found. It's nonprofithub.org. And if you want the long domain, it would be /human-resources/ the cost of starting a nonprofit in every state. And there's a dash in between every single word there. So really not that expensive. My cousin Julie gave me the quote that she was given, and I can't sit here to suggest that the quote is high or low or anything else, but a $5,000 quote to actually set up and get started a 501c3 probably doesn't sound too absurd, to be honest with you, because I think there's probably a lot of attorney time that's involved in that quote. But just the hard costs to set up the organization are not that bad. They're really not. It's something, depending on what forms you file and where you file, it's under $1,000 essentially to get all of the forms filed and supposedly get yourself underway. Now, I've never set up a 501c3 before, but I've been involved in some 501c3 organizations, and my understanding is that it's not the easiest thing in the world to get a 501c3 designation. It has to be legit. So just keep in mind that if you're going to try to establish a 501c3 because you're going to try to divert tax responsibilities or something like that, the IRS is not that dumb. So just keep that in mind. So those are the two answers to the two questions that I got from last week. And I see my friend Keith is watching. Good morning, Keith. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in. I'll do my best to read them as I go. The Facebook live screen that I look at has a really, really tiny little window on the bottom left-hand corner, and I can only see about 2 entries at a time, and they go up. And once they go up a couple of lines, they go up into the abyss, and I can't see them anymore until after the show. I have to watch the show again and go to my Facebook Messenger and see, who typed in questions and things. So if I miss your question while I'm talking, I apologize. And if I miss your question during the week because I just didn't know you asked one, then please call me, send me an email, send me a text, and say, hey, Jeff, what about my question from Sunday? Because I don't want you to think that I'm ignoring you. And the best way to reach me 24/7 is by dialing 833-VASTOLA. That's 833-827-8652. That's a toll-free number. I realize that doesn't matter anymore. But it's a toll-free number that is forwarded to my cell phone constantly, 24/7. So good morning, Amy. Nice to see you as well. If you have a question and I don't answer my phone, leave me a voicemail message and I will get back to you. You can try to send me a text. If anybody has tried to send a text to that number, 833-VASTOLA, and I have not responded to you, let me know that, because that would be the answer to the question that that number is not receiving texts. So maybe as an experiment, somebody send me a text to that number and see what happens. So my topic for today is, again, I'm going to say this a lot for the next several months or several years, whatever it may be. But for those of you that don't know, and I can't imagine anybody that doesn't know now, but we lost my father on December 27th. He passed away due to complications from COVID after about a 2-month battle. He was perfectly healthy the end of October, and I went to lunch with him, and we had a great lunch. And had I known it was going to be my last lunch with him, I would have made more of it than I did. But it was a great lunch. It was okay, I'll see you next time kind of a thing. And little did I know that was the last time that I was really going to get a chance to interact with him, at least face to face. When my dad went into the hospital, he was coherent. he had his cell phone, and for the first day or two, we were able to speak over the phone and things like that. But it was, you know, things became a little bit more cautionary, and you know, just it wasn't real quality time, is I guess what I would say. So for those of you who have loved ones, please take time to spend time with your loved ones, because you really, especially nowadays with this dreadful disease, you just never know when something like that is going to happen. So thank you. A very sincere thank you to everybody that has sent condolences, who sent prayers, who sent kind words. We've received cards and flowers and gifts, and it's just so overwhelming. We really do appreciate it. So I want to thank everybody for that. So, transitioning now into some more free legal advice. I'm going to be talking about some cases from my Florida Law Weekly, unless you have a question of your own, because I'm going to give priority to anybody that calls into the station or anybody that types me a question on Facebook Live. By the way, if you want to be a Facebook Live watcher, in addition to or instead of just listening on the radio, then friend me on Facebook, and in the mornings on Saturday around 7:30, if you are on Facebook, my understanding is that something will pop up as I go live and say, hey, Jeff Vastola is live, and all you have to do is click watch now or something like that, and you will be able to watch the Facebook Live program like everybody else is doing that I see, giving me hellos and waves and things like that. So if you have tried to friend request me and it hasn't worked, let me know that, because I know I keep saying, if you want me to be your friend, send me a friend request. Sometimes I get friend requests from people that I don't know, have never heard of. And I realize there's a possibility that there are some folks listening on the radio that have never called in, have never talked to me in their life, and they could be one of these people that are trying to watch my Facebook Live, and I just haven't accepted their friend request. So if you happen to be one of those people, I apologize. I'm not being rude. I just typically don't accept friend requests from people I don't know. So if you are one of those people, when you send a friend request, try to put a comment in there to say, I'm a radio show listener or something like that. Good morning, Gail. I hope you're doing well today. My stepmother, Gail, words cannot explain what she's been through. So thank you for watching, Gail. Hope you're having a great day so far. I'm going to talk about some cases in my Florida Law Weekly. There are several. This one was a gold mine. You see I flag all the cases I want to talk about. You can see all the cases I flagged today. I realize that most of this stuff is not going to apply to anyone, but there's always the possibility that somebody might be dealing with something like this, or if it's a timeliness issue, that's the first case. You need to be very, very, very aware of timeliness if you're involved in litigation. And by the way, I should give you the radio show number again. If you want to call into the show, interrupt me with your own question. I want your question over my commentary. 877-850-8585. That's the number to call into the show. And this first case is H. Gregg Auto Pompano versus William Raskin. And this has to do with electronic filings, because for those of you that don't know, a few years ago, the state court system and the federal court system in Florida, in two different court systems working at the same time in the state of Florida, they have all gone to electronic filing. Back in the old days, whenever you were going to file something in your case or start a new lawsuit, you had to literally go down to the courthouse and oftentimes wait in a very long line and hand over your paperwork to the clerk behind the counter and get the stamp and so on, and everything's filed. Nowadays, everything is done electronically. You sit at your computer, you upload the document, you send it to the court through the e-portal, and everything is filed electronically. And now you can file on the weekend, whereas before the courthouse was not open on the weekend and you couldn't do that. And this case has to do with when the clerk's clock starts to run based upon when somebody files something. And what happened in this case, and this was a pretty stern ruling, is that somebody filed a document on a Sunday night, which meant that the clock started to run the following Monday. Well, the lawyer on the other side saw that as, because it was filed on a Sunday, then really, because the courthouse is not open on the weekend, it should have been considered filed on the Monday. And kind of a short opinion out of the second DCA here, which is over in the Naples, Tampa area. But, I take that back. It's a Miami case. I take that back. Third DCA, Miami. But the court ruled that the other party, the receiving party, who responded to something within a certain time frame was 1 day late because, like I said, the assumption that the clock started to run on the Monday instead of the clock starting to run on the Sunday. So in the event that you are pro se, if you're representing yourself in litigation, or if you're a lawyer and you happen to be listening, be aware the electronic filing and the calculation of days can be problematic if you wait till the very last minute. Okay, so this next case that I wanted to talk about.
Harold from Royal Palm.
Did you say Carol?
Harold.
Harold. All right, thank you, Shereen. Let's talk to Harold in Royal Palm. Good morning, Harold. How are you?
Hey, good morning. How you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. Give me a moment to turn up my sound so I can hear you a little better. But what's your issue, Harold?
Well, first of all, I wanted to mention that sorry to hear about the passing of your father. My father's actually ill right now. And I wanted to say that, I met your father probably about, I would say 20, 25 years ago when he was living off of US 1 in Northlake. And I happened to be visiting someone in that neighborhood over there. He was walking his little white dog. And that's how I recognized him when I speak to him. He was a really nice person.
He loved his dogs. Thank you for the kind words. We really appreciate that. So what can I do for you, Harold? And I'm sorry to hear. And I'm sorry to hear. I'm sorry to hear about your dad too. I should say that as well.
I think it's a little bit hard for me to hear you as well. You're a little bit muted, but.
Well, go ahead. Give me your issue, Harold. We've got just a couple of minutes. So
Okay.
what's going on?
The reason my question is this: my spouse is in the medical profession, okay, and we own rental properties, and my concern is asset protection because typically if we put our rental properties into an LLC, you're protecting one property from them. Like, for example, if someone gets injured on one property, that they can't take all of your properties. But it doesn't provide protection from the other direction. In other words, if they were to file a suit against, let's say, my spouse, what would be a better way to protect our assets?
Well, this is a great question, Harold, and frankly, it's a topic that I discussed just a few weeks ago. So, although I rarely retain the information, it's going to be easily accessible to me. So, what I'm going to do is I'm already taking notes in my computer about your phone call and what your question is, and I'm going to dig deep into this. And so next week I'm going to make it my topic for a show again. But essentially, there are several different ways that you can own real estate in Florida. There are specifically four different ways that you can own real estate in Florida. There is one that's considered to be a default, but it may not necessarily be the one that you want. And so knowing that your primary concern is asset protection, making sure that because you have several rental properties, somebody with a judgment against you and or your wife will not be able to take all of your properties. I'll talk to you next week about perhaps what's the best way for you to own the properties. Joint tenants with rights of survivorship, tenants in common, those are a couple that just kind of are on the top of my head right now. But between now and next week, if you want to look at your documents to see how it's reflected that they're owned, the words you're going to be looking for is either a joint tenancy or tenants in common or something like that. Okay?
Yeah, we actually own them outright in our names currently, and so we want to change that. But like I say, we're kind of a unique situation with our professions, and so that's my concern. Right.
Well, owning them outright versus having a mortgage on them isn't necessarily what I'm talking about. You do own them outright.
No, I mean we own them in our own names.
Right. But that's okay. So here's the deal. Listen next week, and if you happen to miss the show, you'll be able to listen to the podcast either on my YouTube channel or on my website. But be listening next week because I'm going to give you a really good answer to your question. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your help.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. And I hope your dad feels better soon. All right. Well, that's probably about all the time I've got. Sharina, are you going to tell me I've got about a minute left?
You have a minute 30.
So very quickly, I can probably wrap up with this case. This is a slip and fall case. It's in the 3rd District, again, another Miami case. It's a plaintiff that fell. She prevailed, and at the end of the case, she asked for what's called an additor, which is the jury executed the verdict form, the jury went home, and because the plaintiff wasn't satisfied with the amount, the plaintiff asked the judge for what's called additor, which is adding to what the jury awarded so that she could get more money. And ultimately, the trial judge said, well, I'm going to deny the motion for additor. It went up on appeal. The appellate court said, we think that she's definitely entitled to more money for her past pain and suffering, but the court should consider an additor for that reason. It's kind of a procedural issue, something that might be of interest to somebody. But thank you so much for watching. If you're a Facebook Liver,
30 seconds.
Thank you so much for listening to me and Sharina. And until next week, thank you again to everybody for your prayers and condolences. We really, really appreciate that. And spend time with your loved ones. God bless. Have a great week. Thank you, Sharina.